When I walked into the living room and saw my daughter sitting cross-legged, playing, I allowed myself a smile. This was not something I'd seen before. She picked up one of the little figurines and placed it in front of her playmate. My wife got up from her chair slowly and crept over to me. She placed her arm around my back. I felt her shoulders heave as she began to cry, happy.
See? Just like the psychiatrist said. Just give it time, and she'll come out of her shell. She'll start talking. We're going to have to arrange some play dates.
Looking back, I cannot remember attending preschool or many of the children my age. But I do remember my friends, the ones I talked to in my head. They always told me how great I was at a time when my parents just pushed me from stranger to stranger to work out why I was too intellectually stunted. They told me to not trust the other children. They'd betray me. So I kept to myself. They all had names, but now I can only remember Mr. Wednesday. I think I named him that, but I'm not sure now. I never saw them in the daytime. However, I was always conscious of them being there, somewhere out of sight, like over my shoulder or under the table. My dad was always supportive. I think he thought I was special and needed extra help coping socially. When he tucked me into bed at night, he'd shine a flashlight underneath and state, "You're all clear of monsters, sunshine." After the door shut and the room fell back into the darkness, I could make out the dark silhouettes of them huddled into the corners of my room. They scared me in the dark. They took on a whole new reality. Their shadow-like, ethereal bodies made all the more real by the veil of night. I held my eyes shut tight as I felt them slink back under my bed calmly. When I finally did open my eyes, the silhouettes were gone. But I knew where they were, just feet under my body, waiting for me to wake. When I was 8, I spent the weekend at my grandma's house so that my parents could go on a short trip. I recalled my mother hugging my grandma so tightly and repeatedly thanking her for the opportunity to get away. As she turned, she knelt in front of me and said,
"You be good for your grandmother. She doesn't have the energy we do, so if you make her life hell..."
She sighed.
"Just be good, honey, okay?"
See? She's leaving you again, just like she always does.
I cried. I watched from the porch as the car pulled away, my grandma's hand rubbing my back. Again.
"So, these friends of yours, are they nice?"
I nodded my head.
"I bet they tell you good things about you."
I nodded again.
"Do they say bad things about other people?"
I hung my head.
"Do they say bad things about your parents?"
She had now stopped what she was doing. I looked up, and she was staring at me.
"Do you ever see them?"
I acknowledged her by not breaking my gaze. She squeezed my hand in response. We stopped in front of a glass cabinet high up on the wall, just out of reaching distance. Gently, she opened it and took out a small box similar to that on the table, but this one came with a combination lock. Out of view, she unlocked it. She sat me down on the couch and opened the lid. Inside There were around 20 little cloth men. Some were very basic and some very intricate, their faces painted. Some dressed in miniature clothes.
These are mine.
She started.
No,
She scolded as I reached out to touch one.
you mustn't. These are not to be played with. I made each one of these for every one of them that talked to me, did things to me. For you, they may seem friendly, but I assure you they are not. These, as long as I keep them, they will not bother me or others.
She closed the box up and put it back in the cabinet.
Well, I don't know what kids like to do these days. Would you like cartoons?
Sitting, I tried to smile and watch the TV, but I couldn't ignore the suited man who stood next to it halfway up the wall.
I haven't had to do this for years. I'm sorry if it is not how you like it.
My grandma announced as she pulled the sheets up around my neck.
Don't let the bedbugs bite, sweetie.
She approached the threshold of the door, took one more look at me, and waved, closing the door. Suddenly, I became aware I was not alone. The feeling so palpable, my heart skipped a beat in my chest. The next one, so heavy it took my breath away.
Get that box.
I turned over in bed and scrunched my eyes shut. An anxiety let loose around my nervous system, telling me to run to my grandma's room and dive into her bed. I turned and jumped in shock. Mr. Wednesday stood in front of my bedroom door. A tall girl with her arm in a sling was just behind him, her pigtails cut off near the root, leaving uneven knots of greasy hair on top of her head. She held down by her side, by its ears, what was left of a bunny rabbit. Her smile appeared unnaturally large. Hundreds of teeth slithered in her mouth like a centipede's legs. Just by her feet sat a dog, a mongrel, its tongue slack, staring back at me with two eye sockets long since stitched shut. I panicked and ran into the living room, closing the door behind me. Stepping away from the door, I tried to catch my breath. The handle to the lounge began to turn. I tried to speak. I jumped on the couch and began to climb.
What do you think you are doing?
My grandma shouted through the now open living room door. I turned my head, my lip starting to quiver, tears collecting in the corners of my eyes. I am sorry, Grandma. I am sorry. They... She cocked her head to the side and shuffled towards me as fast as she could.
Oh, I am so sorry, dear. Come.
She opened her arms. I jumped down and ran into them.
Everything's going to be okay. Everything is going to be okay.
The doorbell rang, and my head responded by looking straight at it. My grandma got up from the chair, muddled her way to the front of the house, and opened the door.
Welcome back. Did you have a nice trip?
She asked my mother.
It was great.
She responded, walking into the house. Looking at me, she asked,
How's my little guy?
I just stared. I spun around to see my grandma hold out a wooden box.
Here, take it. Remember, as long as you have them in here, they can't hurt you.
I grabbed the box and on tiptoes kissed her on the cheek.
I'll miss you. You know that, right?
She said as I waved and trotted towards the car. Seeing my daughter playing brought back all those memories. I peered at her playmate. He sat cross-legged in a tatty black suit, his white shirt underneath torn and dirty, his face in shadow cast by his unkempt hat. My daughter asked,
"Can Mr. Wednesday stay for dinner?" She talked. Can you believe it?
my wife said, overjoyed, clapping enthusiastically.
Of course your friend can stay.
She said, confused, looking at her sitting there on her own, so happy her daughter had finally spoke. I feigned a smile and stared at the wooden box on the floor, its contents scattered on the carpet, little cotton effigies not moving like corpses on a battlefield. My attention turned to Mr. Wednesday. He slowly shook his head and brought his finger to his mouth.
Our episode has come to an end. Thank you for spending time with us at the No Sleep Podcast. If you would like to learn how you can hear the full-length version of this episode featuring many more stories, please visit thenosleeppodcast.com and click on the Season Pass link. Purchasing a Season Pass will help support everyone who contributes to the podcast. And in return, you'll get 25 full-length episodes and 3 exclusive bonus episodes, all for only $19.99. This is David Cummings. Thank you for listening, and join us again next week for the next episode of the No Sleep Podcast.